Bet I'll find drugs in this one.
That's what Officer Craig Dawson said while dragging a black man out of his truck on Route 9. Miles Bennett, 42. Clean record. Clean plates. Dawson shoved him face first into the hood.
On your knees. Like the dog you are.
I don't smoke. There's nothing in this truck.
Dawson sniffed the air.
I smell marijuana.
Nodded slow.
That's all I need.
Dawson tore through every bag, every corner, every pocket. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing.
I can got the chemical I need.
Ripping, tossing, dumping. Because stopping meant admitting he was wrong. And when he popped open one last box in the trunk and saw something gleaming on dark velvet, his smirk died. His legs went weak.
So what?
Oh, man. To understand what happens next, we got to go back to that morning. 6 hours before that traffic stop, Miles Bennett's morning looked like every other morning for the past 3 years. 5:30. No alarm. His body just knew. 20 years in the Navy did that. Rewired the clock inside him until sleep became a mission and waking up became muscle memory. He swung his legs off the bed, bare feet on cold hardwood. The house was quiet. Denise was still asleep, one arm tucked under the pillow, breathing soft and steady. He watched her for a second, just a second. Then he laced up his running shoes and stepped outside. The streets of Norfolk were empty. Fog sat low over the sidewalks. Miles ran his usual 4 miles, past the elementary school, around the park, down to the waterfront, and back. No music, no podcast, just his breathing and the slap of his shoes on wet pavement. By 6:15, he was back in the kitchen. Protein shake, 2 eggs, black coffee. He ate standing up at the counter, scrolling through messages from the veterans in his program. Miles ran Harbor Point Foundation, a nonprofit he'd built from nothing after he retired from SEAL Team 4. The organization provided housing, counseling, and job placement for homeless veterans. 46 men and women had come through the program so far. 31 were now employed. 9 had reunited with their families. Miles kept every number in his head because every number was a name, and every name was someone who almost didn't make it. He wasn't rich. The foundation ran on grants, donations, and whatever he could squeeze out of local businesses. His truck was a 2018 Ford F-150, paid off, no flashy rims, no tinted windows, the kind of truck that disappears in traffic. But today, that truck was carrying something that didn't disappear. Sitting behind the back seat, wedged between a folded American flag and a framed unit photograph, was a walnut shadow box. Inside that box was a Navy Cross, the second highest valor decoration in the United States Navy. Beneath the medal sat an official citation signed by the Secretary of the Navy, a challenge coin from SEAL Team 4, and a handwritten letter from a 2-star admiral. The medal wasn't for show. Miles was driving it to the Veterans Memorial in Arlington for a ceremony the next morning. A tribute to the 6 men in his unit who never came home. 6 names Miles carried every day. In his chest, in his throat, in the silence between conversations. He called Denise around noon from a gas station outside Richmond. "You eat lunch yet?" she asked. "I'll grab something on the road." "Miles Bennett, if you show up at that ceremony running on coffee and stubbornness," he smiled, "I'll stop. I promise." "You better. Love you." "Love you too." He hung up, topped off the tank, and pulled back onto Route 9. Route 9 in Colton County, Virginia, was the kind of road that looked peaceful from a distance. 2 lanes, pine trees on both sides, golden afternoon light cutting through the branches.
But Colton County had a history that didn't match the scenery.
The year before, an ACLU report had flagged the county's police department for a pattern of disproportionate traffic stops against Black and Latino drivers. The numbers were ugly. Black drivers were stopped at 3 times the rate of white drivers, despite making up less than 18% of the local population. The Department of Justice had placed the department under a federal consent decree 2 years ago. Mandatory reforms, quarterly reporting, oversight. But paper reforms don't change the officers holding the badge. Officer Craig Dawson had been on the Colton County force for 8 years, 36 years old, son of a retired state trooper, grandson of a county sheriff. Law enforcement wasn't his career, it was his bloodline. He'd applied for detective twice, rejected both times. His supervisors cited judgment concerns, but never put him on a real improvement plan. He stayed on patrol, and patrol gave him exactly what he wanted: control. 14 complaints had been filed against Dawson by Black and Latino motorists over those 8 years. 12 were dismissed. 2 resulted in what the department called verbal counseling. No suspension, no retraining, no consequence. Dawson didn't think he was racist. He called it street instincts, experience, pattern recognition. That's what made him dangerous. Not hatred, certainty. And on this golden afternoon on Route 9, his certainty locked onto a black Ford F-150 doing 55 in a 60 zone. Dawson hit the lights at 4:47 p.m. No siren, just the silent flash of blue and red bouncing off the pine trees. The kind of pullover that's already decided before it starts.
Miles glanced in his rearview mirror. Patrol car, closing fast. He checked his speedometer, 55. Speed limit was 60. He signaled right, eased onto the gravel shoulder, and put the truck in park. He kept both hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, visible, still. This wasn't his first time. The patrol car sat behind him for nearly 2 minutes before anyone stepped out. That's a tactic. Let the driver sit. Let the silence build. Let the imagination do the work.
Finally, the driver's side door opened. Craig Dawson adjusted his belt, set his jaw, and walked toward the truck like he already knew what he was going to find. His right hand rested on the holster. Not gripping, just touching. A reminder. His partner, Officer Tina Nolan, stepped out slower. 28. 18 months on the force. She stayed near the patrol car, one hand holding the radio, eyes scanning the road. Something about the way Dawson had said, "Watch this one," before they'd even turned on the lights, made her stomach tight. She said nothing. Dawson reached the driver's window and knocked twice with his knuckle. Hard. Not a request. Miles lowered the window. "Good afternoon, officer." Dawson didn't return the greeting. He leaned in close, scanning the interior, the passenger seat, the back seat, the center console. His eyes moved like he was cataloging. License and registration. No please, no sir. Miles reached for the glove compartment. Slow, deliberate. He pulled out the documents and handed them over with 2 fingers, keeping his other hand flat on the steering wheel. Dawson looked at the license, looked at Miles, looked at the license again. "Where are you headed?" "Arlington, Virginia. Veterans Memorial Ceremony." Dawson didn't acknowledge the answer. He turned and walked back to his patrol car, license in hand. He sat in that car for 8 minutes. 8 minutes is a long time on the side of a highway. Long enough for the sun to shift. Long enough for 3 cars to slow down and stare. Long enough for Miles to feel the sweat building on the back of his neck. Not from fear, but from the effort of staying still when every instinct said this wasn't right. Inside the patrol car, Dawson ran the plates. The results came back in 45 seconds. Clean registration, valid insurance, no warrants, no prior offenses, not even a parking ticket. He stared at the screen. Then he closed the laptop. Something's off with this guy, he said to Nolan through the open window. His record's clean, Craig. Record doesn't mean anything. You learn that after a few years. He stepped out and walked back to Miles's truck. This time, his stride was different, wider, slower. The walk of a man who's already decided the next 10 minutes. Mr. Bennett, he said the name like it tasted bad. System's flagging something on your plates. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. The system wasn't flagging anything. Nolan had seen the screen. She knew. She said nothing. Miles exhaled through his nose. Can I ask what's being flagged? You can ask. Doesn't mean I have to answer. Step out. Now. Miles turned off the engine, placed the keys on the dashboard, opened the door with his left hand, keeping his right hand visible. He stepped onto the gravel and stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, hands open at his sides. Dawson circled him once, slow, looking him up and down the way you'd inspect something you'd already decided was broken. Turn around, hands on the hood. Miles placed his palms flat on the metal. The engine had been running for 3 hours. The hood was hot enough to sting. He didn't flinch. Dawson patted him down. Not procedure, performance. He pressed Miles's chest into the hood, ran his hands down his sides, too hard, too slow. Checked his pockets twice, found a wallet, a phone, and a set of house keys. Nothing. Dawson squeezed the phone. Passcode. You don't have the authority to search my phone without a warrant. Dawson set the phone on the hood, smiled. We'll see about that. He leaned close enough that Miles could smell the coffee on his breath. Then Dawson sniffed, loud, theatrical. You smell that, Nolan? Nolan was 15 feet away. She hadn't smelled anything. Smell what? Marijuana, Dawson nodded, already moving toward the truck. Coming right out of the cab. That's probable cause. Miles turned his head. I don't smoke. Never have. Doesn't matter what you say. Matters what I smell. That sentence, 8 words, was the entire legal fiction Dawson needed. In most states, an officer's claim that they smell marijuana is enough to justify a vehicle search. No proof required, no confirmation, just a nose and a badge. Miles knew this. He'd read about it. He'd heard the stories from the veterans in his program, men who'd survived combat zones only to be treated like criminals on their own streets. He turned back to face the hood, pressed his palms down again, and waited. Dawson yanked open the driver's door. Meanwhile, a silver sedan had pulled over about 50 yards behind the patrol car. A woman in the passenger seat held up her phone, recording. The angle caught everything. The truck, the hood, Miles's posture, and Dawson climbing inside the cab. Nolan noticed the phone. She shifted her weight, touched her radio, but she didn't say a word. Dawson started with the glove compartment. Registration papers, insurance card, a tire pressure gauge, and a pack of napkins from a fast food chain. He tossed them onto the passenger seat. Center console, a phone charger, $3 in change, a pen. He pulled out the gym bag from the back seat, unzipped it. Workout clothes, a towel, a pair of running shoes that smelled like sweat and asphalt. Nothing. He found a small cooler on the floor, popped it open. 2 water bottles and a sandwich wrapped in foil. Denise had written, "Eat this," in marker on the foil. Dawson dropped the cooler on the ground. The water bottles rolled into the gravel. Nothing. He went back in, reached under the passenger seat, pulled out a small Bible with a cracked leather cover. A bookmark stuck out from the middle, a photograph of 6 men in desert camo, arms around each other, squinting into a sun that burned white behind them. Dawson glanced at the photo, tossed the Bible onto the dashboard. Religious type, huh? He said it the way someone says, "Nice try." Miles didn't respond. His knuckles had gone pale against the hood, not from fear, from the effort of keeping his mouth shut, from the weight of knowing that anything he said, any word, any tone, any movement, could be rewritten into a reason. A second car pulled over. A man in a gray pickup stepped halfway out, phone raised. Then a third, a teenager in the back seat of her parents' car, filming through the window. 3 phones, 3 angles, and Dawson hadn't noticed a single one. His jaw tightened, his neck flushed red. 15 minutes of searching, and all he had was a gym bag, a sandwich, a Bible, and silence. He was too deep now. Pulling back meant the stop was bad. The recording was still going. Nolan was watching. And Craig Dawson had never once, not once, in 8 years, pulled someone over and walked away empty-handed. He wasn't about to start today. He slammed the back door shut, walked past Miles without looking at him, and dropped the tailgate. The truck bed was clean. A toolbox bolted to one side, a spare tire strapped down, a canvas duffel bag, and behind it, a folded American flag, a framed photograph, and a walnut box. Dawson went for the duffel first. He grabbed it by the strap, swung it off the tailgate, and dumped the contents onto the road. Clothes spilled across the gravel. A shaving kit cracked open. Toothbrush, deodorant, a razor. They scattered like someone had upended a life and shaken it out for inspection. Miles heard it all. The zipper. The thud. The sound of his things hitting dirt. He didn't turn around. "Nice wardrobe," Dawson said, kicking a folded shirt with the toe of his boot. "Where'd you get it? Goodwill or a back door?" He picked up a pair of dress shoes from the pile, held them up, sniffed inside one, dropped them both. Nothing. Nolan took 2 steps forward. "Craig?" Her voice was low, careful. "There's nothing here. Maybe you should stay by the car and let me do my job." Nolan stopped. Her jaw moved like she wanted to say something else. She didn't. She went back to the patrol car and leaned against the door with her arms crossed. Her body camera was still running. She made sure of that. Dawson climbed up onto the truck bed. His boots scraped the metal liner. He opened the toolbox, wrenches, a socket set, jumper cables. He threw the jumper cables out. They hit the asphalt with a clang that echoed down the empty road. Nothing. He kicked the spare tire, checked behind it, ran his fingers along the edges of the truck bed liner, pressing down, looking for seams, hidden compartments, anything. Nothing. He crouched down and pulled the canvas tarp off the remaining items. The American flag, the framed photograph, and the walnut box. He picked up the flag first, unfolded it halfway, let the fabric hang from his fingers like a rag. Patriotic, huh? He tossed it onto the pile of clothes in the dirt. Miles heard the flag hit the ground. His whole body went still. A different kind of still. Not compliance, not patience. The kind of still that comes right before something breaks. 6 men died under that flag. 6 men whose names were etched into Miles's memory like scars on bone. He'd carried that flag to their funerals. He'd folded it for their mothers. And now it was in the dirt on Route 9. Thrown there by a man who'd never carried anything heavier than his own ego. But he didn't move. Dawson grabbed the framed photograph next. 6 men in desert camo. Dusty boots, sunburned faces. Arms locked around each other like they knew some of them wouldn't be standing much longer. He barely looked at it, set it face down on the tailgate. The glass cracked. A thin line running from one corner to the other, splitting the frame right down the middle. Miles heard the crack. His jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. Then Dawson's hand found the walnut box. It was heavier than he expected. Solid. The wood was dark, polished, with a small brass latch. Not the kind of thing you'd find in a department store.
Not the kind of thing you'd find in most people's lives. Dawson shook it. Something shifted inside. Metal on velvet. "What's in the box?" Miles turned his head, just enough to see over his shoulder. "That's personal military property, officer. I'd ask you to handle it with care."
You'd ask me. Dawson dropped down from the truck bed, the box under his arm.
"That's cute. Everything in this truck is my business right now." He set the box on the tailgate, flicked the brass latch. It didn't open. There was a small lock holding it shut. "Open it." "No." It was the first time Miles had said that word all afternoon. Flat. Quiet. Final. Dawson's eyes narrowed. He stepped in close enough for Miles to feel the heat coming off his face. "What did you just say to me?"
I said no. That box is not part of any legal search. Legal search, Dawson laughed, high and sharp. You sound like a lawyer, but you don't look like one. He stepped back, pointed at the ground. Stay right there. Don't move. Then Miles's phone buzzed on the hood. The screen lit up. A name glowed in the afternoon sun. Denise. Dawson looked at it, looked at Miles, then picked it up and swiped. Hello? A pause, then Denise's voice, confused. Who is this? Where's Miles? Ma'am, your husband's being detained on Route 9. Might want to start thinking about bail. Miles spun around. For the first time, his voice cracked the surface. Put the phone down. That's my wife. Back on the hood, now. Dawson held the phone away like a toy. On the other end, Denise's voice rose, sharp, scared, asking questions that nobody was answering. Miles? Miles, what's happening? Who is that? Dawson hung up, set the phone face down on the hood, smiled at Miles like he'd just won something. Miles turned back to the hood, pressed his hands down. His fingers were trembling now. Not from fear, from the sound of Denise's voice, the panic in it, and the fact that he couldn't tell her he was okay. That's what broke him. Not the search, not the slurs, not the flag in the dirt, not the cracked photograph of 6 men who would never stand together again. It was the 3 seconds of his wife's fear, played out loud on a highway shoulder while a stranger held the phone. His eyes were wet. He blinked once, set his jaw, and pressed his palms harder into the hot metal. A 4th car had pulled over now. A man standing outside his door, phone held high. The teenager from earlier had stepped out of her parents' car entirely. She was crying, but her hand was steady. The camera didn't shake. Nolan counted the phones. 4 angles, maybe 5. The whole thing was already out of Dawson's hands. He just didn't know it yet. Traffic had slowed to a crawl. A truck driver honked twice as he passed. Someone yelled something from a window, but the words dissolved in the wind. A woman in a minivan pulled her children's faces away from the glass. This was no longer a traffic stop. This was a scene. Dawson didn't care. He was past the point of caring. The search had turned up nothing, and nothing was unacceptable. He had told Nolan he'd find something. He had told himself he'd find something. And now 5 phones were pointed at his back, and the only thing standing between him and humiliation was a locked walnut box. He picked it up again, turned it over in his hands, ran his thumb along the brass latch. You know what I think? He wasn't talking to Miles anymore. He was talking to himself, to the version of himself that needed this to be right. I think you've got something real interesting in here, and I think you're real nervous about me finding it. Miles said nothing. His hands were still on the hood. His back was straight. His breathing was slow and measured, the kind of breathing they teach you when someone's shooting at you, and panicking means dying. Last chance. Open it, or I break it open. Silence. Dawson pulled out his baton, jammed the tip under the brass latch, twisted hard. The lock popped. The wood cracked at the corner, a small fracture running through the grain like a scar that would never heal. He flipped the lid, and the road went quiet. Man, No, 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 no. Just stop and imagine for 1 second. You're standing there, hands on a burning hood, your wife crying on the phone, your flag in the dirt, and you can't do a single thing about it. You tell me, could you keep standing there? Because I honestly don't know if I could. Inside the box, resting on a bed of dark navy velvet, was a medal. Not a pin, not a ribbon, not some dusty souvenir from a gift shop near a military base. A Navy Cross, the second highest valor decoration awarded by the United States Navy. A bronze cross, oxidized to a deep copper green, hanging from a navy and white ribbon. Below it, a cluster of bronze oak leaf clusters, each one representing a separate act of heroism. Dawson's fingers hovered over the velvet. He didn't touch it. Couldn't. His hand just hung there, frozen midair, like his brain had sent a signal and his body had refused to deliver it. Beneath the medal sat an official citation. Heavy paper, embossed seal. The words were printed in a font that didn't belong on the side of a highway, the kind of font reserved for things that matter. Dawson's eyes moved across the top line. The Secretary of the Navy takes pleasure in presenting the Navy Cross to Petty Officer First Class Miles A. Bennett, United States Navy, for extraordinary heroism in combat operations in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. His lips parted. No sound came out. He read on. The citation described a firefight that lasted 9 hours. An ambush on a convoy. 6 members of SEAL Team 4 pinned down in a drainage canal with no air support and no extraction route. Bennett, Miles Bennett, the man whose face was still pressed against the hood of a truck 20 feet away, had carried 2 wounded teammates across 400 meters of open ground under continuous enemy fire. He went back a 3rd time for the team's radio operator. The radio operator didn't survive the night, but the other 5 did because of Miles. Below the citation sat a challenge coin from SEAL Team 4. Heavy, bronze, worn at the edges from years of being held, turned over, rubbed like a prayer. And beneath that, a handwritten letter on personal stationery. The signature at the bottom? Rear Admiral William T. Crawford, United States Navy. The letter was short, 3 paragraphs, but the last line read, "In 32 years of service, I have never recommended a man for the Navy Cross. You are the exception, and you are the standard." Dawson set the box down on the tailgate. His hands were shaking. Not a lot, just enough. Just enough that if you were standing close, you'd see the tremor in his fingers, the way his grip had gone loose and uncertain. Nolan walked over. She looked into the box. Then she looked at Dawson. Then she took 1 full step backward, like the ground beneath her had shifted. "Craig," her voice was barely a whisper. "Craig, what did you do?" He didn't answer. Miles turned around, slow. Not because he was told to, because it was time. He looked at Dawson the way a man looks at something small. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. "That medal." Miles's voice was low and even. "I was driving it to Arlington. There's a ceremony tomorrow morning, a tribute to the 6 men in my unit. 2 of them died in my arms." Dawson opened his mouth, closed it. "I've been standing on this hood for 30 minutes. Miles took 1 step forward. "You dumped my clothes on the road. You threw my flag in the dirt. You hung up on my wife. You called me an animal." Another step, and you did all of it because of one thing. One thing you decided the second you saw my face. Dawson's back hit the tailgate. He had nowhere to go. Miles stopped. He didn't raise his voice.
Didn't raise his hand. He just stood there, 6'1", 220, with the kind of stillness that only comes from having survived things that would have broken most people in half.
I'm going to need your badge number, officer, and your partner's. And I'm going to need you to put that medal back exactly where you found it. Dawson's mouth moved. Look, I was doing my... You were doing your job? Miles tilted his head, just slightly. I've heard that line in 3 countries, officer. It's never once been true. The bystanders were close now. The man with the gray pickup had walked within 30 feet. The teenager was standing on the shoulder, phone steady, tears running down her face. The woman in the silver sedan had her window down, and the audio on her phone was picking up every word. Nolan stepped forward. She didn't look at Dawson. She looked directly at the nearest camera and read his badge number aloud. Clear, steady, like she'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Officer Craig Dawson, badge number 3416, Colton County Police Department. Dawson didn't stop her. He was staring at the medal, at the citation, at the name, his name, the name he'd said like it tasted bad an hour ago, printed beneath the seal of the Secretary of the Navy. Miles reached past him, picked up the walnut box, closed the cracked lid as gently as a man closing a casket, tucked it under his arm. Then he picked up his flag from the dirt, folded it. Not fast, not angry. He folded it the way they taught him, triangle by triangle, star over star, while Dawson stood 3 feet away and watched in silence. Nobody on that road said a word. Dawson broke first. His mouth opened before his brain caught up. The words came out cracked, rushed, tangled. Like a man trying to put a fire out with his bare hands. Sir, I didn't know. You didn't know. Miles hadn't moved. His hands were still on the hood, but his voice had changed. Not louder, not angrier. Colder. The kind of cold that settles in a room when someone stops pretending. That's the whole point, officer. You shouldn't have needed to know who I am to treat me like a human being. Dawson swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed like a stone caught in his throat. The confidence that had carried him through 8 years of unchecked stops, unchallenged searches, and unanswered complaints, all of it had drained out through his boots and into the gravel. He tried again, reached for the only card he had left. The marijuana. You smelled nothing. Miles turned around now, slow, deliberate, the way a man turns when he's done being patient. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, let alone marijuana. And when your dashcam audio gets reviewed, and it will, they're going to hear you fabricate probable cause in real time. Dawson looked at Nolan. She didn't look back. Her eyes were fixed on the ground 3 feet in front of her boots, and they weren't moving. Miles pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb fracture from when Dawson had set it face down on the hot hood. He dialed a number, put it on speaker, held it out between them like a witness. 2 rings. Miles, talk to me. Raymond Cole, civil rights attorney, former Navy lieutenant, SEAL Team 4, class of 2004. The man who'd been Miles's swim buddy through BUDS training 20 years ago. The kind of training where you either trust someone with your life or you wash out. Cole didn't wash out. Neither did Miles. And 20 years later, that trust hadn't lost a single thread. Ray, I'm on Route 9 in Colton County. I've been detained without cause. Officers searched my vehicle based on a fabricated marijuana claim. He found nothing. He also opened a locked box containing my Navy Cross and service citation. A pause on the line. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then Cole's voice shifted, lower, sharper, every word landing like a gavel. Is the officer still on scene? Standing right in front of me. Good. Officer, my name is Raymond Cole. I'm an attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the District of Columbia. I'm advising my client to file a formal complaint under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. I need your full name, badge number, and your supervisor's name. And I need your department to preserve all dashcam and body cam footage from this stop immediately. Any deletion or alteration will be treated as spoliation of evidence. Do you understand? Dawson's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something that wouldn't break down. Nolan answered instead. She stepped forward, her voice steady, clear, and aimed directly at Miles's phone. Attorney Cole, this is Officer Tina Nolan, badge 2208. I'm Officer Dawson's partner. My body camera has been active since the start of the stop. I'll ensure footage is preserved. Cole. Thank you, Officer Nolan. That's noted and recorded. Dawson stared at Nolan like she'd just pulled a pin on something he couldn't put back together. Miles stayed on the line. Ray, I'm going to need you to contact Captain Elaine Foster at the Colton County Precinct, and I want a formal request for Dawson's full complaint history. Already on it. Don't say another word to anyone until I get there. I'm 90 minutes out. The line went dead. For a long moment, nobody moved. The bystanders were still filming. The teenager had sat down on the shoulder, phone propped on her knee, still recording. Her face was red and streaked with tears, but the camera hadn't dropped once. The man in the gray pickup had his arms crossed, watching with the expression of someone who's already decided the verdict. Then, a second patrol car appeared on Route 9. Lights on, no siren. Sergeant Phil Greer stepped out. 51, barrel-chested, 23 years on the force. The kind of man who'd survived 2 decades by knowing when to act and when to look the other way. He'd done a lot of looking the other way. He walked toward the scene with his hat in his hand, a gesture that said he already knew this was bad before he'd unbuckled his seatbelt. He looked at the crowd, the phones, the metal sitting open on the tailgate, catching the last of the afternoon light, the clothes in the dirt, the cracked walnut box, the American flag, folded now but stained with gravel dust, and Dawson, standing with his arms at his sides, looking at nothing, like a man watching his own life from the outside. Greer pulled Dawson aside. They spoke in low voices for about 90 seconds. Whatever Dawson said made no difference. Greer's face didn't change. It just hardened, line by line, like cement setting in real time. He walked back to Miles. Sir, I'm Sergeant Greer. I apologize for... Sergeant, my attorney is on his way. I've been advised not to speak further, but I want Officer Dawson's badge and weapon removed from his person before I leave this road. Greer looked at Miles, looked at the metal, looked at the phones, 5 of them now, maybe 6, all pointed at him like a jury that had already reached its verdict. He nodded once. Dawson, badge and weapon, now. Dawson's hand went to his belt. Slow, like his body was moving through water. He unclipped his holster, set his service weapon on the hood of the patrol car. The metal touched the paint with a sound that was too small for what it meant. Then he unclipped his badge from his chest and placed it next to the gun. 2 objects, a career, a pension, an identity. All of it sitting on the hood of a patrol car on the shoulder of Route 9. Greer picked up both. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Officer Nolan will drive you back to the precinct. Nolan opened the rear door of the patrol car, the same door where suspects sit. The same door Dawson had put hundreds of people behind. He looked at it for a long moment, the way a man looks at something he never expected to be on the other side of. Then he ducked his head and climbed in. Nolan closed the door behind him. The lock clicked. The same partner he'd been ordering around all day. The one he'd told to stay by the car. The one he'd cut off mid-sentence. The one whose concerns he'd swatted away like dust was now driving him home in the back seat. She started the engine, checked her mirrors, and pulled onto Route 9 without a word. The video hit the internet before Dawson's patrol car reached the precinct. The teenager, her name was Abby Coleman, 17, home from school with a sinus infection, had uploaded her recording to Twitter with one line. "This just happened on Route 9. Watch the whole thing." By 9 p.m., it had 40,000 views. By midnight, 600,000. By the time the sun came up the next morning, every major news outlet in the country had the footage. The woman in the silver sedan had captured a different angle, tighter, closer, with audio clear enough to hear every word Dawson said. The man in the gray pickup had filmed the moment Dawson opened the box. His footage caught the exact second the smirk left Dawson's face. That 3-second clip became its own post. It was shared 200,000 times in the first 12 hours. But it was Nolan's body cam footage that ended everything. Captain Elaine Foster ordered its release within 48 hours. The department had no choice. The consent decree required transparency, and the DOJ was already watching. The body cam showed everything the bystander videos missed. It showed Dawson saying, "Watch this one," before the lights even went on. It showed him closing the laptop after the plates came back clean. It showed him sniffing the air and inventing the marijuana smell. It showed him answering Denise's call and saying the word bail while her husband stood with his face on a hood. And it showed him throwing an American flag in the dirt. Local reporter Amanda Sills ran the story first. Her piece aired on the 6 o'clock news with the headline, "Decorated Navy SEAL Humiliated During Traffic Stop. Officer had zero probable cause." Within 24 hours, the story had gone national. CNN picked it up, MSNBC, Fox. The Washington Post ran a long-form piece on the history of pretextual traffic stops in Colton County. The New York Times published an op-ed from a retired federal judge titled "The Smell Test: How a Legal Fiction Enables Racial Profiling." Miles didn't do interviews. He didn't post anything online. He didn't make a statement. Raymond Cole handled everything. And the first thing he handled was a federal civil rights lawsuit. Cole filed under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 against Officer Craig Dawson individually and the Colton County Police Department as an institution. The complaint listed 17 causes of action, including unlawful detention, fabrication of probable cause, destruction of personal property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the lawsuit was just the civil side. The Department of Justice, already monitoring Colton County under the existing consent decree, opened a supplementary criminal investigation within a week. Federal investigators subpoenaed Dawson's phone records, his patrol logs, and his department email. What they found blew the case wide open. Dawson had been part of a group chat with 4 other officers. The messages went back 3 years. On the day of Miles's stop, Dawson had texted the group at 4:32 p.m., 15 minutes before pulling Miles over. "Got a live one on Route 9. Easy money." After the stop, another officer in the chat had replied, "Another one?" followed by a laughing emoji. Dawson responded, "You know it." Those messages became Exhibit A, but there was more. The investigation uncovered that Dawson's 14 prior complaints weren't just dismissed, they were actively buried. Sergeant Greer had signed off on 11 of the 12 internal dismissals. In 3 cases, the complainant's written statement had been edited before being placed in the file. Words changed, details removed, conclusions softened. Greer didn't just fail to supervise Dawson, he protected him. The federal grand jury returned a 3-count indictment against Craig Dawson. Count 1, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Count 2, filing a false police report based on the fabricated marijuana claim. Count 3, evidence tampering. Investigators found that Dawson had attempted to reset his body camera after the stop. The footage survived only because the system backed up automatically to a cloud server he didn't know existed. The trial began 4 months later in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. It lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution played the dashcam footage in full, unedited, uncut, from the moment Dawson's lights went on to the moment Nolan drove him away in the back seat. The courtroom was silent for 11 minutes straight. They played Nolan's body cam footage next, then the bystander videos, then the group chat messages, projected on a screen large enough for the jury to read every emoji. Raymond Cole testified as a character witness for Miles. He told the jury about BUD/S training, about the firefight in Helmand Province, about the 6 men, about the 2 Miles carried across open ground and the 1 who didn't make it.
Miles Bennett, Cole said, served this country in ways most people can't imagine. And on May 14th, on the shoulder of Route 9, he was treated worse than any enemy combatant I ever encountered overseas. Dawson's defense attorney argued standard procedure. He claimed the marijuana smell was genuine. He claimed the search was within protocol. He claimed Dawson had no racial bias, just instincts. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, 4 black, 3 white, 2 Latino, 2 Asian American, 1 Native American, deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All 3 counts. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. Judge Patricia Holden looked at Dawson for a long time before she spoke. Officer Dawson, you took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon against a man who had already given more to this country than most people ever will. This court sentences you to 36 months in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently decertified as a law enforcement officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the United States. Civil damages were set at $850,000, paid jointly by Dawson and Colton County. But the fallout didn't stop with Dawson. Sergeant Phil Greer was demoted to patrol officer for his documented pattern of dismissing complaints and altering witness statements. He resigned 2 weeks later. 5 officers from Dawson's unit, including 3 members of the group chat, resigned preemptively when the DOJ expanded its investigation. The Colton County Police Department was ordered to implement mandatory bias training every 6 months, quarterly dashcam and body cam audits conducted by an independent civilian board, a zero-tolerance policy for fabricated probable cause, and a complete overhaul of its internal complaint process. The consent decree, originally set to expire the following year, was extended by 5 years. Miles Bennett arrived at Arlington 1 day late. He pulled into the parking lot at 7:45 a.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 8. He'd driven through the night, not because he had to, but because he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Denise's voice through the phone. Every time he opened them, he saw the flag in the dirt. So he drove. The morning air was cool and still. A light fog sat across the memorial grounds, softening the edges of the white headstones that stretched in every direction. Miles sat in his truck for a few minutes. The walnut box was on the passenger seat. The crack in the corner ran along the grain like a thin scar, a reminder that some things survive damage, but never look the same. He picked it up, stepped out, and walked toward the ceremony. He didn't expect what came next. The crowd saw him before he saw them. About 200 people, veterans, families, Gold Star mothers, active duty sailors in dress whites.
Someone near the front recognized his face from the video. Then another. Then a murmur rippled through the rows like wind through tall grass. And then they stood. Not all at once. One man first, an old Marine in a wheelchair, pushing himself up with both arms shaking. Then the woman beside him. Then the row behind them. Then the next, and the next. By the time Miles reached the front, every person in that crowd was on their feet. No applause, no cheering, just silence and respect. The kind of silence that says more than any standing ovation ever could. Miles set the walnut box on the memorial table beside 6 photographs. 6 faces. 6 names. He touched each photograph once, just a fingertip to the glass, and stepped back. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. The video had already said everything. But later, at a press conference organized by Raymond Cole, Miles stood behind a microphone and said 12 words that every news outlet in the country ran as a headline. I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to drive to Arlington. He paused, looked down, then back up. But if what happened to me on that road wakes one person up, then maybe those 6 men I lost would say it was worth the detour. In the weeks that followed, Harbor Point Foundation received more donations than it had in the previous 3 years combined. A 400% increase in 30 days. Enough to open a second facility in Richmond. Enough to hire 6 full-time counselors. Enough to take in 40 more veterans who had been sleeping in shelters, in cars, or on the ground. Miles didn't keep a dollar of the civil settlement for himself. The entire $850,000 went into the foundation. When a reporter asked him why, he said, "That money came from pain. Might as well turn it into something that heals." Denise went back to teaching the Monday after the trial ended. Her students had seen the video. One of them, a 9-year-old boy named Caleb, walked up to her desk before first period and set down a folded piece of paper. Inside, in crayon, he'd written, "Your husband is brave. You are too." She kept it in her desk drawer for the rest of the year. As for Officer Tina Nolan, she cooperated fully with federal investigators. Her testimony was key to securing the guilty verdict. She transferred to a department in Northern Virginia with a community policing model and became one of the loudest advocates for bystander officer intervention training in the state. She never spoke to Dawson again. And Dawson? He reported to Federal Correctional Institution Petersburg on a Tuesday morning in October. 36 months. No badge, no pension, no authority. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index, a permanent record that follows a disgraced officer across every state line in the country. He will never carry a badge again. Respect isn't something you earn by showing your medals. It's something every person deserves the moment they step out of their car. Man, imagine you on that hood. Hands burning. Wife crying on the phone. And you didn't do a damn thing wrong. Could you just stand there? Because that's real life for millions of people. If that hits you, drop a comment, share this, smash that like, and subscribe. These stories need to be heard.